eyes with Nixon's journal. In it he noted the latitude and longitude of the hill near the village. But those coordinates meet in this sort of country. There's no permanent water here and no hills. Something's drastically wrong with Nixon's navigation.
Lieutenant Nixon would have set his latitude using one of these things here. They're a sextant, and they were designed for use on board ship, where you always had a perfectly flat horizon no matter where you were in the world. But once you take these things onto land, it's a different story. You've got ups and downs and heights and all sorts of things, and I think that he forgot that. Because every 150 foot you are in elevation above sea level, you're in fact 12 nautical miles further to the south than what the instrument tells you. I'm just beginning to wonder if he took that into account. And if he didn't, that means I should be looking further to the south down there.
What fascinates me is that if a Dutch settlement did exist in this vast, lonely place, how on earth did they get there? Where did they come from? Nixon learned that 80 men and 10 women had survived a shipwreck on the West Australian coast. But a shortage of food forced them to move. Apparently, they walked east towards the rising sun. In this part of the country, the only easy way inland is to follow the Fitzroy River. It forms a natural corridor between the rugged Kimberley and the Great Sandy Desert. But can we be sure the Dutch undertook this journey? What evidence is there to say that they may have travelled through this part of Australia?
Have a go at this. You see something like this and it's absolutely mind-boggling because clearly this is not Aboriginal. Right here we're almost 800 kilometres in from the coastline, and yet we can come up to rock and find an engraving like this. This is not a painting, this is chipped into the rock, and that makes something very special about this because this rock is extremely hard, and to chip a design or a drawing like this into this rock, you've got to have some sort of iron tool or something. It looks almost like a female, sort of medieval type of era. And the face has really got a three-dimensional aspect to it. Who did it? Dunno. But maybe, just maybe, it could be Dutchmen walking inland. This is typical Kimberley country. Lots and lots of rock and spinifex for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And that's horrible stuff to walk through because it's also got the name of porcupine grass for the same reason that it's got all these spikes at the end of each leaf there, and they're like needle sharp things that dig into you, and sometimes they even break off, so to walk through it would be an extremely painful experience.
Imagine Dutch men and women trudging through this sort of country for months on end. What baffles me is that if this story's true, why did the Dutch walk east over 1,000 kilometres into unknown country? They had no maps, their supplies were low, and water was scarce. Nixon was told many died along the way. Yet, despite these amazing odds, they apparently crossed a final ridge and followed the creek to the large stretch of water that Nixon saw from his Mount Singapore 170 years later.
This little box of tricks here is what you call a GPS, a global positioning system. And basically what that does is it talks to satellites, lets me know where I am on the Earth's surface. Handy little bit of kit. Of course, I remember years and years ago when I was a digger in the Australian Army, we reckoned that the most dangerous weapon we had was an officer with a map and a compass. And of course, now we're trying to chase Nixon, who was a lieutenant in the Indian Army, and the position he gives us. And who's chasing him? A retired major in the Australian Army. Double jeopardy, that one, don't like your chances. Anyway, this is his latitude, and it goes all the way through, like this country here, flat, nothing, all the way across to the Stuart Highway. And there is no mountain in there. There's no Mount Singapore, there's no water, nothing. How do I know that? About 2 years ago, I flew all this country looking for it. Just like this, all the way across. Latitude-wise, I think we've got a bit of a problem.
This is Nixon's latitude, 18 degrees 30. Either side of it, I've searched a huge area, 60 by 240 kilometres. But I've had no luck finding two specific things: a prominent hill near a large body of water.
What I'm interested in now is the creek just to the south of it, around about the 19-degree mark. This one here, Wilson Creek. It's got a bit of permanent water in it, particularly on the eastern end, because there we've got a swamp. And that swamp is rather interesting. Got this here photograph here, taken back in 1972, and you can see that the sand dunes run east-west, but the swamp, the eastern end of it, finishes in a straight line that runs from the northwest to the southeast. And it almost looks to me as if it's been dammed up or walled up or something like that. It's got a bit of an overflow that catches between the sand dunes and then carries on, but almost looks unnatural to me. I've also got another air photo taken way back in 1950, and it's still there then, so it hasn't been man-made in recent times anyway. Whatever it is, I reckon it's worth a good look.
This is it. It's what I call hands-on research. Nothing beats actually getting out there. Of course, it's easy for me, exploring from the air, but I can't help thinking about Nixon and his party, pushing through this harsh country, constantly looking for water. As we approach the swamp, I wonder, could this be the spot Nixon reached 160 years ago? From here, the idea of a wall or a dam looks even more convincing than on the air photos. But as we fly lower, something totally unexpected happens.
Well, there's that patch of dirt that I thought, on the air photography at least, looked a bit like a mound of earth, but as you can see, it's as flat as a pancake. Bit deceptive though, because over here on one side we've got high vegetation, and right here we've got brown earth poking through. And over there to the east we've got green spinifex grass, and the effect of that on a photo makes it look as if this bit in the middle here is jumping up, which of course it's not doing. One thing I can tell you though, this swamp is not the one that Nixon was talking about. Sure enough, we've got a mountain back there, but it's about 8 miles back. You'd never see anything from the top of that down here. But it does show you one thing. Here in the desert country, you can get big mobs of water, just like this lot here, and exactly the same sort of thing that Nixon was describing.
During my long search, I've learned to deal with a lot of disappointment, and at times it's been a bit discouraging. But as I backtrack through Western Australia, I'm nagged by other things. Things that I've found that support the idea of a lost colony. Nixon's latitude of 18 degrees 30 runs right through the country that belongs to the Warramunga tribe. This tribe was one of a number that the anthropologists Spencer and Gillen studied during the early part of this century. In their notes, I found a couple of interesting things about the Warramunga people. For instance, Warramunga men pluck their facial hair, making their beards quite distinctive. To me, this profile reminds me of a Dutchman from an earlier time. In Warramunga mythology, one particular group of totemic ancestors apparently came from a country across the sea. Now, the Dutch told Nixon that their ancestors were from a distant land across the Great Sea. I have to wonder, were the Warramunga people possibly influenced by Dutch neighbours for 170 years? In 1851, this Dutch magazine published an article from a harbour master who'd been stationed at the port of Samarang in Java in the 1830s. He recalled a ship arriving from the north coast of Australia. Some of the passengers had travelled inland, where they'd met 300 Dutch people living in a totally primitive manner. I find it so frustrating that the article doesn't mention the name of the ship, how many passengers, or whether there was a Lieutenant Nixon on board.
You know, you've really got to ask yourself the question, is this story true? And the number of times I've asked myself that, I hate to think. But when you read the extract from his journal, you can't help but be sucked in by it, but believe that it is true because the detail he's put in there, etc., makes it very, very realistic. And one of the things that I really find interesting is that in the beginning, when he first sees these Dutch people, he's very excited. He thinks it's terrific. It's a new civilization for him. But after staying there 8 days, all that's changed. And he's quite discontent about the whole thing. He reckons they're mismanagers and ignorant, and he wants out of there. He wants to go back to his ship and clear off back to Singapore. We haven't got much to go by. Just one column in a newspaper. But maybe one day we'll find the rest of the journal. And when that happens, we'll be away.